Support for this podcast comes from the St. Alphonsus Neuroscience Institute, offering technology to provide treatment for neurological, neurosurgical, and neurointerventional conditions. This includes a dedicated neurotrauma ICU for critical care of the brain or spine and a 24/7 stroke team. More at stalphonsus.org.
It's The Connector from Boise State Public Radio News. Good morning, I'm Troy Oppie. Today, multiple protests through the weekend in Boise of immigration action taken by federal officials. The state's new nuclear energy task force will meet for the first time today. And Idaho's superintendent of public instruction says no to lawmakers' request to cut her budget. It's Monday, February 2nd, and this is Boise State Public Radio News. We begin this morning on the lawn in front of the Boise office of the Department of Veterans Affairs, where hundreds gathered Friday to memorialize Alex Pretti. Jackson Holmes was there.
Tonight's vigil will be one focused on Alex, his service to veterans, and his community. There will be no speeches or calls to action, just remembrance and respect for Alex.
Pretti was a 37-year-old ICU nurse for the VA in Minneapolis. He was shot and killed by Border Patrol agents on January 24th, while he recorded video on his phone of large-scale immigration crackdowns. Many attendees of Friday's vigil were connected to the VA. Scott Smith works for the office in Boise.
I feel strong affiliation to the VA and people like him that were just trying to help immigrants and refugees.
The event included a moment of silence to remember Pretti. Many people left flowers and mementos in front of the sign for the VA. People also wrote postcards that will be delivered to Pretti's coworkers in Minneapolis. Ron is a veteran. He was with his wife, Sue. Together, they say they've attended 7 immigration-related events in the last month.
I think people are starting to wake up and realize that this is a bad thing that's happening. It's not a good thing.
Jackson Holmes, Boise State Public Radio News.
That was one of several gatherings through the weekend related to federal immigration enforcement. Around 600 cyclists took to the streets Saturday in Boise, also honoring Alex Pretti. Separate rallies at the Capitol steps and in Caldwell this weekend included both pro- and anti-ICE groups. Idaho Superintendent of Public Instruction Debbie Critchfield says she's not going to cut public school budgets. That response after lawmakers on the Budget-Setting Joint Finance Appropriation Committee sent a memo last week to the Education Department and the Division of Medicaid within Idaho's Department of Health and Welfare, asking those groups to join the rest of Idaho's state agencies in mapping out additional 1% and 2% cuts to the current and upcoming fiscal years. K-12 schools were exempt from previous 3% cuts ordered by the governor last summer. The new request and Critchfield's response were first reported by Idaho Ed News. In her response to JFAC, Critchfield wrote that the state's public school budget is already, quote, in line with the state's fiscal reality, unquote. Declining enrollments in most districts already means schools will receive less funding. A 2% cut to public schools would be about $55 million. Other agencies have been instructed to plan for additional budget cuts and inform JFAC how those reductions would affect agency operations. At the State House today, an updated tax conformity bill will receive a hearing in the House Revenue and Taxation Committee. This is the bill that's needed to line up Idaho's tax code with federal tax code. Usually, it's a rubber stamp. This year is different because of tax cuts in the Trump administration's One Big Beautiful Bill. How much those tax cuts will cost Idaho if it conforms was first estimated at $155 million for this and next budget year. It's now forecast to have a $175 million impact on fiscal year 2027. Some lawmakers are concerned that those estimates are still too low based on the impact seen in other states and projections from the nonpartisan policy think tank, the Tax Foundation. Budget writers are already dealing with a projected budget deficit and looking to make new cuts to government spending. That hearing begins at 9 a.m. Also today, the House Local Government Committee will hold a hearing on Republican Representative Bruce Scogg's bill that would force cities in Idaho to drop local discrimination protections that don't line up with the state's anti-discrimination statutes. That would affect roughly a dozen Idaho municipalities, which currently provide specific protections for LGBTQ people, protections that are not included in state code. That hearing begins at 1:30 today. Idaho companies larger than 150 employees that do business with public entities should verify their workers' eligibility to work in the U.S. using the E-Verify system. That would be the requirement of a new bill introduced at the State House Friday by East Idaho Republican Representative Mark Harris. That requirement has been in place for state contractors for more than a decade. The new bill would extend it to all governments.
This bill is basically says if taxpayer dollars are involved, the employer must use E-Verify to address the legal status of their employees.
The bill is similar to legislation introduced the last two sessions that did not advance, but both previous attempts would have required all employers in the state to use E-Verify. Governor Brad Little's Advanced Nuclear Energy Task Force meets for the first time at the State House today. The governor formed the group this past September by executive order. It's co-chaired by Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke and the director of the Idaho National Laboratory, John Wagner. Other members of the 18-person task force include Attorney General Raul Labrador, Jess Byrne, director of the State Department of Environmental Quality, and vice presidents of energy companies Pacific Corp and Idaho Power. The task force meeting will be streamed by Idaho in Session, but the group has not published its agenda as of this recording. Boise police say an investigation continues into a shooting early Sunday morning. No one was injured when police say they responded to a report of gunfire in the 4400 block of West State Street about 4:15 in the morning. Bullets were confirmed to have struck a nearby business. A suspect vehicle fled when located on State Street, eventually crashing on North Lander, not far from the site of the shooting. That's where police say they detained 3 people. So far, the driver of the vehicle, a 19-year-old woman from Twin Falls, faces charges of driving under the influence, fleeing police, and aiding and abetting. Others have yet to be charged. Police are asking anyone in that area with possible surveillance footage to contact investigators. Scientists have created the most detailed groundwater map ever for the United States. This comes as much of the Mountain West is facing another dry winter. Here's Caleb Radel with more from the Mountain West News Bureau.
Discussions about water in the West often focus on rivers, reservoirs, and snowpack, but much of the region's freshwater is actually underground. Reed Maxwell is a Princeton engineer and co-author of the study, done in collaboration with the University of Arizona.
You always think the closest water is like a lake or a river or a stream, but the closest water is beneath your feet. That, as an education outreach component, is really important, particularly in the West, where it's so out of sight, out of mind.
The study uses machine learning to estimate groundwater depth at a very fine scale, about 30 meters, roughly the size of a city lot. In the Mountain West, the data shows groundwater can vary sharply over short distances, information that could help communities plan for drought and avoid overpumping stressed aquifers. The new groundwater map is publicly available. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Caleb Radel.
There wasn't enough snow for the Iditarod qualifier races this year, but the Idaho Sled Dog Challenge still hosted its shorter Warm Lake stage race, won this year by Kason Judd of Colville, Utah, who averaged nearly 10 miles an hour over the 2-day, 54-mile course. Defending champion Carolyn Neville of Middleton finished 8th out of 9 teams this year. The annual McCall Winter Carnival is underway, back to its 10-day-long run after 2 years of a shorter celebration. First place in the Snow Sculpture Awards from judges, Payette Lakes Middle School Art Club in the amateur category, Bella's Kitchen in the pro category. Bad news, though, that sculpture collapsed yesterday in warm temperatures. The People's Choice Award is still open for voting at visitmccall.org. The carnival runs through this weekend. Boise State Public Radio News. That's your connector for February 2nd. Happy Monday. Groundhog saw his shadow, by the way. That means 6 more weeks of winter, allegedly. The Connector is a production of Boise State Public Radio News. Our general manager is Tom Michael. Our news director is Sasha Woodruff. Our digital strategy manager is Lacey Daly. I'm Troy Oppie. George Prentice is back tomorrow. Make it a great day.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.